Well, thank you for coming tonight and letting us share with you our experience of being in Israel for 12 days. Nadine and I, the gospel, I will say, is what really brought us together as a couple. As we both went to Johnson Bible College to study the Scripture and learn ministry, and we've been living the book, living the Word, living the gospel in various places for 39 years as of earlier this month, together as husband and wife, and so to have a chance to go to Israel and to just to see the places that we've studied and taught and preached about, and just it was a marvelous experience. And thank you for letting us share with you a little bit this evening. We're going to go back and forth here. We'll have different places in our narrative where we'll exchange places here and talk a little bit more about that. And we brought a display of things that will help you understand more about that afterwards. Please take a look at that. But let's begin with a word of prayer as we remember whose land and whose people we are. Gracious Lord, we thank you for the opportunity to come together in Christian fellowship and to just share these experiences together. And we pray, Lord, Nadine and I want to first say thank you for the opportunity to go and the people we got to go with and the safety going and coming and just the chance, Lord, to again look at the place where your people and your Son have been and where your church began. And as we are here today in this time and place, we know we're a part of that great narrative that goes on. And so we praise you, and I thank you for the chance to share this together, and bless us this evening. In Christ's name, amen. Well, we've tried to take about 2,000 pictures. Well, we didn't try. We did. We took 2,000 pictures. We tried to take those pictures and bring them down to something manageable tonight, and to really look at a narrative that starts in the early days of the Bible and works our way forward. And so this first picture is a photograph of an excavation of a city gate in the far north of Israel, in the land which was occupied when Abraham came in, the land of the Canaanites. And they lived there. And Abraham followed the call of God to this new place. And he came in from the north, from Haran. And this is an excavation of a gate of a major Canaanite city in the north, near what we would call Dan in the north. And they're saying very, very likely there's no reason why Abraham wouldn't have walked right up those steps and through that gate and into that city, because that was a northern major entry point for the people of that time. And so why wouldn't Abraham have gone right into this gate? The next picture is just a sign of the Canaanite gate, the gate of the three arches. And if the next picture shows a model of what that looked like as you would have walked up to that gate, Abraham and his family and all that he had with him making their way into that city. So that's a model of what that gate would look like. So we're really jumping around a little bit here. We couldn't take pictures of all the narrative, but this is a picture of the Jordan River just before it flows into the Dead Sea. And this would have been approximately where Joshua and the Israelites would have crossed over. Of course, we've moved from Abraham. We've passed by all the account of Isaac and Jacob and the sons and going to Egypt and Moses and all of that. So we've got 400 or 500 years of time that's passed. But this is the lower Jordan, and there's another picture, I think, that gives another site. That is actually the kingdom of Jordan on the other side. So that is not a very large expanse there. You can throw a rock across the Jordan River from Israel on the left or on the right to Jordan on the left. And that's also a baptismal site for people today, and we'll see more of that a little bit later. But this is where Joshua and the tribes would have crossed over. Much wider in those days, and it was flood stage, of course, the Bible tells us at that point. So we keep rolling ahead. This is actually the Tel Jericho. This is the actual archaeological site of Jericho with modern Jericho around it. And that's where, and we'll have some more pictures as we just go forward with that, showing some details of some of the excavation and some of the places, revealing the walls or digging down. Of course, everything is buried, and you've got to go down after it in those days. And there's a few more pictures, I think, of other, you can see the bricks and the walls area. I think this is not necessarily back to Joshua's day. This was later, okay, because Jericho is the oldest continuously occupied city in the world, they say. It goes back like 6,000 years. People have lived in this place, and people, of course, build their houses and towns on top of who was there before, and so a lot of digging down. Go ahead. It's a picture, kind of more of a scene of the area. We're down in the desert area. 60% of Israel is desert, and further south you go, the drier it gets. And so we're getting down into that area. And some more scenes of, they had a place we could get up high and do some panorama lookouts there. Jericho is about 3,000 feet lower than Jerusalem. That's why when you go down, you go down from Jerusalem up to Jerusalem, and they talk about that. Some other signs. This is Jericho, the modern city. We can proceed, I think, on...
Looking toward the Jordan there, I think.
Oh, that's right, looking toward the Jordan. And here's, just livestock on the hillsides, goats and sheep and cattle, a few camels we saw. It's this very dry area. We'll see more of this as we go forward. Okay, here we go. We're moving into the times of the judges here, times of Gideon, and this sign is at the Herod Spring. Let's go ahead and take the next picture here. This the story of Gideon and his army, and God saying, "Drink from the brook or drink from the spring, and then I'll tell you who's going to fight the battle." And 300 men end up being picked. And we know that story. Well, this is the site of that spring. It's really turned into a modern park. When we were there, they were working on it, so they had kind of temporarily halted the water flow. But in its operation, people go there. It's a splash park almost, for kids. These days, all the historical sites are national parks settings in Israel. They put a lot of effort in preserving these things. Next picture is our group in front of that cave out of which the spring would flow. And next picture, I think, shows us trying to, drink from the spring, kind of a model. Our guide was very good about helping us get into the moment of these places, whether that meant a song or a scripture reading, or maybe a dramatic portrayal here. So we're there at that spring. Here we are still in the time of the judges, but we were thinking more of Ruth and Boaz at this point, because this is in Jerusalem, as the shepherd's field is across the way, and in the distance would be Nazareth, or not Nazareth, but Bethlehem. And so they have weddings up here at this place, and so different ones of us paused to get a picture taken there, Ruth and Boaz and all that kind of romance there. Next picture. That is the shepherd's field, pitch shot from Bethlehem, looking back to it.
It's the edge of Jerusalem, looking toward Bethlehem.
Looking toward Bethlehem. Okay, that's kind of where we were standing, and looking out over the hill across the way to Bethlehem and that. All right, we've moved a bit further here. They're into the time of David, and this is the Valley of Elah. And I don't know if you know what happened in the Valley of Elah. Some pretty important thing with some stones and a sling. This is where the encounter between the Philistines and the Israelites was happening, and David and Goliath. And that's we walked along that area and the brook, and there's some stones on the table up there that Nadine collected from the brook Elah, there. And there's a few more pictures to just get a little close-up of that. Dry. We got there just after the rainy season, so things were still fairly green, but the water wasn't flowing. We'll see more of that up north when we get up in the north part. Some wheat. They had a good field of wheat right there. Next, okay, and here we're going into Jerusalem because David had conquered the city. of Jerusalem and set up the palace for himself there. And this is where some excavation about that palace. So next picture will show us some of the excavators at work there. This is also in the area of Hezekiah's time, but we'll come back to that in a little bit. Next picture, again, some of the outside walls and trying to preserve what's there. Kind of looks like it's kind of crumbling a little bit there, but there is a lot of work. This is in the old city city of David, the oldest part of Jerusalem. And another picture, the gentleman with the hat there, that's David, our guide, David Aarons. He emigrated from the United States to Israel with his parents when he was 19. He lived in Boston. So our guide was a red-headed Bostonian Jew with an accent and a lot of fun. He was a fun guy. We really enjoyed him, and very I could pick up. He's conservative in his theology, Jewish, very connected to his land, and just had a real appreciation. Again, he was always referring us to the Bible, reading verses of Scripture at certain places. So we had a really good, excellent guide, I felt. This Zion Gate was in the proximity to King David's tomb. It was built much later than the Bible times, but it's called the Zion Gate, and we're close to King David's tomb. And this is that gate, right? This is that gate as we go into, you see, much of Jerusalem has been built over time. I mean, you have things that are very old, other things that are newer, middle age kind of things. Different gates, all kinds of entries to the city. You see the lions on the, I believe that's why they call that the Lion Gate. Another one of the entry points to the city. Of course, David's son was Solomon, and Solomon expanded the kingdom. And Megiddo was a city that's again ancient, very ancient city. Was not taken in the initial conquest, but later on when Solomon consolidated his power and all that, he was able to take Megiddo and turn it into a place where he had his horses and chariots and stables, and his power center is a very powerful crossroads fortress town, and he captured that. That was up on the southern slope of the Valley of Jezreel, and there's maps up here that we'll pick up. Again, a very hot day, and we were up there, kind of just walking around all these ruins, and we can just kind of work our way through these pictures. The high point looking out, we'll see some scenes looking out. That's the Valley of Jezreel behind us. You can see maybe 3 high points behind us, like mountains. Nadine knows.
Tabor is the one on the
Mount
left.
Mount Tabor on the left.
In the middle is Morah.
Yeah.
And on the right is Gilboa.
Gilboa. And Mount Gilboa is where Saul died fighting the Philistines. They had these iron chariots up there, and we're pretending to be Jehu, the king who drove furiously in that chariot there. And that's the actual stable walk. Of course, all the roofs are all gone, but you can see some of the stall areas where the horses were kept up there. All right. Of course, after Solomon, something happened to the kingdom, didn't it? What happened to the kingdom of Israel after Solomon's day? It divided out. Solomon's son Rehoboam, but there was another person named Jeroboam, and Jeroboam took the northern tribes and separated it from Solomon's southern kingdom. And so to keep the people from going back to Jerusalem to worship in the temple, the great and glorious temple that Solomon had built, he set up a separate place, set up a northern version, and at a place near a place called Dan. And this sign talks about that. But we're going to look at that site in the next couple of pictures. Snow runoff. This is where we get in the green. This is the Galilee. It was a beautiful place to be. Very green, very lush. Where we're at, the snows of Mount Hermon were melting, and all the brooks were filled, and it was just a refreshing place to be. And actually drank out of that stream, I'll say. Just couldn't resist. This is the temple site that Jeroboam set up for his people so they wouldn't go south and go to Jerusalem. And the next picture will give us a closer up view. Well, that's another sign that we picked up that tells kind of the story. The next picture will give you a closer view of that setup. It's a much smaller setup. That metal framework is where the altar of burnt offering would have been in those days. So we basically, they're still worshiping. They wouldn't say they're worshiping a false god. They're worshiping Yahweh in this north. But it, of course, like sometimes happens, religion begins to serve the political agenda, and that's what was going on with Jeroboam at that point. Things just got progressively worse, though, as time went on, as they became more corrupt. So we are now. This is moving into Elijah's time. Elijah had a pretty big encounter with some false prophets somewhere on a mountain. Remember the mountain was called? Mount Carmel. Mount Carmel. That's where he fought. They had the prophets of Baal and the fire came down and all this. Well, that's a view from Mount Carmel looking east across the valley of Jezreel. And the valley of Jezreel is the breadbasket of Israel today. I mean, they just grow all kinds of things. You'll see food later on in the pictures. And that's another picture again of just the well-tilled fields, the irrigation. They're just getting all of the ground they can get. Very, very independent agricultural enterprises over there. All right. After Elijah came Elisha, and this is back in Jericho, and this is where something happened. Oh no, we got lost. We are connected again. Okay. The oldest city in the world, Elisha healed a spring. I forget exactly what he threw.
A branch?
A branch, some kind of wood in it, and made the water drinkable again. Well, this is their attempt to recognize that here at Elisha. And there's another couple of pictures here, I think, that tells the story. This was again in Jericho. And one more picture, I think. Yes, Elisha's drinking water. Okay, I didn't try drinking out of that, but that's Elisha's drinking water. I suppose it was good for you, good for what ails you, I guess. We're moving into Hezekiah's time. I'm going to work through the Old Testament. When we get to Jesus' time, then Nadine's going to take over from there. But we're up to Hezekiah, and this was a morning where David brought this challah bread, which is a traditional Jewish bread, and he was passing it around. I don't think there was anything particular significant about the moment. He just it's a hospitable gesture is what it was. And I think it was our first morning maybe in Jerusalem. Okay, and that's our group there. Just some pictures of Jerusalem, looking at it from the old city of David, and flowers. We're always taking great pictures of great flowers. Excavation. We saw a little bit of this before, but now we're focusing on Hezekiah's time because Hezekiah had a major project that provided water for his people during siege. And let's go ahead. He dug a tunnel that connected a spring outside the city to internal storage cisterns. And so they could stand a siege a lot better that way. And so a guy named Warren found it. So here we go down into it. A lot of times it felt like we were caving, going down into these dugout areas and excavated places. So we're going down into this area and trying to get down to Hezekiah's tunnel. And I think here we are getting ready to go in to the tunnel. There's a wet tunnel and a dry tunnel option. I was fighting a cold for like 4 days. I caught something from some kid who was sitting behind me in the plane. I just coughed on my shoulder all the way. 10 hours of listening to that. And I knew I was getting it. So for 4 days, I was just done. After that, I had to get some medicine. So we opted not to walk through the wet tunnel. We went through the dry tunnel, Nadine and I, a lot shorter passage, narrow as you're trying to get through here. And you can see it's lit, but you're kind of going this way and going through. So if you like caving, it's cool. If you don't, these ladies and others were in the wet side. So they were walking through water about maybe knee-high and just making your way through this real narrow shaft. You're shaking your head. That's not what you're not up for that. Okay. Also, Hezekiah had built walls during his reign, and so it's called the Broad Wall. And The next picture, I think, that's below street level. You can see how everything's about at least 20 feet below street level to get down to what you were talking about Bible times and that. So, okay. Telluride is a town in the south that we saw later in the week, but it fits in the narrative here because they too had a temple in the south that they were doing as kind of, I guess, an option of worship, a local worship. And so Telluride was a place, and we have some pictures of that scene. It's the only temple site extant in Judah that they've ever discovered. This is the only thing. North did lots of stuff with their religion and their practices, but in the south, this was the only example. And it didn't, Hezekiah came along and said, this isn't appropriate, this isn't proper, you need to be coming to Jerusalem. And so basically it was abandoned. But they've been able to excavate it and show some things from it. And that's our guide, Paul Rogers. He's the gentleman from Park Chapel who put the group together. And incidentally, they are going back in 2018 in October if you want to hook up with that tour. But you can see that they had their Holy of Holies with the little diagram there. And then the next picture will show the actual close-up of that altars of incense. And then in the back, there's that tablet representing the Torah. And that, of course, would have been all covered over and veiled and everything in that day and all. This is out of the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. This is the oldest piece of text of Scripture that exists in the world. This is a let's get a closer up picture of it.
Next, yeah.
This is a amulet that was found in a child's grave, put there, probably by the parent, and it has on it the blessing of number 6. May the Lord bless you and keep you, and make his face shine upon you, and be gracious unto you, and lift his countenance upon you, and give you peace. It's a priestly blessing that these parents wanted their in this unfortunate death. They blessed this young one that way. This is about 400 years older than the Dead Sea Scrolls, and they're old. The Dead Sea. This goes back about 800 BC probably, and this is the oldest example of text. So we know that blessing out of Numbers was well known and well used in that time. So, and that's it's silver amulets, the oldest copies of biblical text in that. We're moving pretty fast here. This is the area of Qumran, which is south of Jerusalem, south of Jericho, close to the Dead Sea. This is where the Essenes established their community. This was a group of very strict Jews who believed that they were the pure ones and everybody else was corrupt and the world was coming to an end, so let's go out in the desert and get ready. And so they had a community that existed about 100 years, right up to the time of Jesus. These people were part of the culture of Jesus' day. And they lived out in this desert community, and they made a life for themselves. And there's other pictures that we'll see there, again, ruins of that, and we can go on. And I don't know if you can see, the next picture will probably bring a closer up view. Yeah, that cave, that's one of the caves where they found the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Essenes were the ones that inscribed all of that and preserved those in jars. And so some shepherds found them in the 1940s. And that was they still remain the oldest. The only book missing, I think, in the Old Testament is Esther. It's not there, but all the others are there. And they verify the authenticity of Scripture and accuracy of Scripture. Another picture of that from the distance. Very dry area, very, very, very desolate area. And Nadine's taken over here. Welcome to Jerusalem, he says. Yes.
Actually, the donkey represents Bethlehem. We're getting ready to go to Bethlehem now. This was taken in Jerusalem. The guy was giving us rides. Well, he was charging for rides, but we didn't end up riding. Russ took the picture here. So we're on our way to Bethlehem, like Mary would have traveled probably in her day. So the next picture shows Bethlehem. When we arrived at Bethlehem, we first went to the Church of the Nativity, and there's the door. The next picture shows this very small door. It's called the Door of Humility. You had to bow down to go into the door. And they built it that way on purpose back in the medieval days when the Ottomans controlled that area. They built it to protect that area so they couldn't just come up and on horseback and raid it fast and for protection. And now they're in the process of remodeling the church there, the Church of the Nativity. 3 different churches, hold it right there for just a second. 3 different churches have a part of this building. So as we went through the building, we saw 3 different churches that had parts of it. This area right here is downstairs in the cave area where they think this was a spot where Jesus was born, where the manger was laid. Very sacred spot. So we went down in there. The next picture shows that area. No, shows that. Okay. Yeah, that area. Okay. And they had murals different places, and there we are down in that area. Okay, next. Here's one of the churches, and the next picture shows one of the pipe organs. Beautiful building. Like I say, some of it was in reconstruction. This is the shepherd's field outside of Bethlehem. A few minutes ago, we saw it from the other angle, from Jerusalem looking toward Bethlehem. Now we're in Bethlehem looking back toward Jerusalem. Jerusalem and Bethlehem these days are just kind of like a hilltop apart. You have Jerusalem on one hilltop, Bethlehem on the next hilltop. Maybe they weren't quite that close back then, but today that's the way it is. And the area down below is the shepherd's field. And the next picture shows another picture of shepherd's field area where the shepherds are still there. There's still sheep down in that field today and people taking care of sheep. I don't know if I have a close-up of that. Maybe there they are, the sheep and cattle. And you see them. It just takes you back in time. They're still there. And then, of course, as we were in Bethlehem, we saw different sites.
Built over the original inn.
Right, okay.
Oh, no, not really.
There are other street scenes. As we walked along the streets of Bethlehem, different restaurants we saw, and the next one is almost St. George's, where we ate lunch that day. I think we had lamb that day.
Yeah.
We saw the Bethlehem Peace Center, just different sites around Bethlehem. And then this moves on to Nazareth. Of course, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem, they went to Egypt for a while, then he grew up in Nazareth. This is the hill of Precipice looking southeast. Stop and think about my map. Southeast, and there you see part of Morah and Gilead from a distance. You could also see parts of the Jezreel Megiddo Valley too.
This is where they said they took Jesus to throw him over the cliff, but he walked away.
Right, where they were trying to. This is actually a picture of Nazareth. We didn't really drive through much of Nazareth. We only drove through the edge of Nazareth. And it's a large city, as you can tell today, but taken from the same area. We're just looking at Mount Tabor is always easy to pick out. It looks like a little rounded top. So Mount Tabor you can pick out easily in any of the pictures. That's it there from a distance. Again, that's Morah and Gilead, I think, to the right. And there, the valley below was the valley. Our group there at the top of the Mount of Precipice. And as we move on, Jesus then, of course, would have been baptized in the Jordan River. This scene from the Jordan River is the northern part of the Jordan, just south of the Sea of Galilee. And this is where we were baptized. We were given a choice to be baptized in the Jordan if we chose, and most of our group, as you'll see in a couple pictures here, did choose. They had it fenced off. Just before we got ready to go in, I looked down and we could see these big catfish swimming around, and I'm going, oh my. But we didn't see them. I didn't see them. I really wasn't looking when I got in. And,
I felt one.
You felt. And several of our group decided to be baptized. This is before. And Russ assisted with some of the baptisms, and he baptized me, and Dave Woods baptized most. And this is the other side of the Jordan River that we visited, southern, just north of the Dead Sea. This was probably the more probable site where Jesus was baptized. Don't see that this is the site I think Russ was showing earlier. The water's browner, Jordan's just across the river, very short distance away. And they also had baptismal sites there, but of course we were baptized at the northern side. And then we move on to the Mount of Temptation. From Jericho, we could see the Mount of Temptation where they think Jesus was tempted, where he went up on the mountain and the devil showed him the countries and said, if you will bow down and worship me, I'll give you all the empires here. And Jesus said no. And then as we think about Jesus traveling, we're back up in Galilee. He would have traveled from Nazareth, the hill country, to the region around the Sea of Galilee. And this is a valley called the Valley of the Wind and Doves that goes between these two mountains And it's an ancient path that walks, where you walk in between these two mountains from Nazareth area to the area of the Sea of Galilee. And people still use it today. And it's just neat to think that Jesus walked all these places and these very steps where we were this whole time. And we have some more pictures of the mountains on one side. And then the mountain on, there's in between the path. And then the next one, I think, shows the cows coming down. While we were standing there, here comes a bunch of cows down, and we're going, oh, we weren't expecting that. Our guide kind of gave us a hard time. You Indiana people haven't seen cows before? I go, well, not in Israel. And they were just coming down. Nobody was with them. And while we stood there, they came down and drunk from the little brook there at the bottom of the hill. And it was a pretty place. It's still there, that area. And then we moved on to Capernaum. We know Jesus was rejected in Nazareth. In fact, they tried to push him down the hillside. He then started to reside in Capernaum. And this is something I never realized before. In the Bible, it says the town of Capernaum became known as the town of Jesus, and from then on. We know some of his disciples were from Capernaum, Peter and Andrew and others. But, he resided in Capernaum, and a lot of the miracles are done in Capernaum. So it was neat. And notice the spelling. Did you notice that? A lot of things were spelled different. A lot of things were pronounced different than I grew up pronouncing them. So, and when we got into Capernaum, we got to see the side of Peter's house. They built this building over top of Peter's house. Where, he had a nice house, didn't he? But you'll see up close, and the synagogue too. So the next picture shows Peter's house. Of course, Jesus healed Peter's mother-in-law at Peter's house. We know he was there. And then a lot of the streets and foundations of the houses of Capernaum are still there. And that's kind of a view of what the town would have looked like. Here's some of the foundations of the houses. Very small, but they went inside to sleep and cook, but they were outside a lot when possible, weather permitting. And you could see the Sea of Galilee there. Both those pictures, you see the Sea of Galilee back in the background there. And then we, of course, saw the synagogue. The synagogue at Capernaum, Jesus would have visited and taught from. This synagogue was built after the time of Jesus. But the foundation, I think in the next picture shows the foundation, was dark along the bottom, would have been built, the original foundation that would have been there when Jesus' day. And so we got to look around the synagogue, and we had our group picture taken. And the next picture shows, maybe one more, that's inside. Our group picture taken there. Real hot and sunny. We're all looking at the sun squinting. But anyway, our group picture taken there inside the synagogue at Capernaum. And then we went on down the hill. Capernaum is very close to the Sea of Galilee. If you remember your map, it's on the northwest corner of the Sea of Galilee. We went on down the hillside a little further to the edge of the sea. And this church on the left is the Church of the Bread and Fishes, Loaves and Fishes. I don't really think Jesus fed the 5,000 from this site, because when you read Scripture, they say they went to the other side of the lake. But anyway, this is where the Church of the Loaves and Fishes is. The next picture shows the Sea of Galilee, how clear the water is. We're here on the northwest side looking south, and you can see pretty much all the way across it in most places. I always pictured the Sea of Galilee being bigger. I mean, teaching kids about the Sea of Galilee and this and that happened. But as you can tell, mountains do surround most of the Sea of Galilee. I really like this area. This is one of my favorite areas, the Sea of Galilee, if you can't tell. Maybe because it's rural out in the country and it was just gorgeous. This is from higher up. This was near the Church of the Beatitudes, looking down toward the Sea of Galilee. Same area. And there was some flat areas around the Sea of Galilee on this side, on the northwest side. There were a couple springs that flowed into the Sea of Galilee in this area. And because of that, they think that's where a lot of the fishing was done. We know a lot of time Jesus was in and out of the boats of Peter and different ones, and they would talk about going out on the sea. So probably the fishermen would have fished from this location lots of times. Because it was spring-fed, the fish would have come there to eat from the area. So a lot of fish were probably in the area. And another picture from the same area. This shows kind of the flat land here. But then it raises up to your right. The next picture shows a little bit more, I think. It would have been a natural amphitheater where Jesus could have sat at the bottom and taught, and where everyone would have been able to hear, because the hillside does raise up quite abruptly pretty soon to the right of that. And then one of my favorite things probably was going out on the Sea of Galilee in a boat. And we got on the boat, and they raised the American flag, and we sang the Star-Spangled Banner. That was neat. It gave me goosebumps. That was really interesting, really a neat experience. There we are on the boat. After we had a worship service, we thought, well, we'd have some quiet time. At least that's kind of what was planned. But some of the guys on the boat says, well, you want to do a little Jewish dancing. So some of us got up and did some Jewish dancing. Too bad I don't have the video here. But Russ is taking the picture because he feels puny. But anyway, I got to do a little Jewish dancing on the boat. So you see me in there a little bit. You'll see some more. Lots of pictures around the edge of the Sea of Galilee, like the mountains.
Is that Mount Hermon in the back?
What's that?
Is that Mount Hermon?
That is Mount Hermon. If you can barely see the top of Mount Hermon, Hermon is what, 9,000 feet?
That we had that view, yeah.
We'll see some closer pictures of it later. There's another picture across the water. Didn't see very many boats out there, just a couple that day, not a lot. This was in the middle of the week. Different views along the seashore. We kind of went out to the middle, and we didn't go all the way around, but we just went out to the middle. There we are dancing. There's Dave Woods on the right and our guide on the left. And that's me in the middle with the hat on. Okay. Okay, on the eastern side of the Sea of Galilee, there was a restaurant at Engiv where we ate the St. Peter's fish. St. Peter's fish is tilapia, and they cooked it for us whole, and it was delicious. And go ahead and show we enjoyed the restaurant there. We also had pita bread and salads. The next picture shows the fish. And we shared it, plenty of food for both of us. We had salads and pita bread, and always had good, fresh, lots of vegetables. I know you love the eye on the fish. Mm-hmm. Everybody always comments on that one. But it didn't bother us at all. We enjoyed it. This is just north of the Sea of Galilee. This is the northern part of the Jordan River, where it flows, getting ready to flow into the Sea of Galilee. We're crossing it, heading into the north country, where Jesus would have visited with his disciples as he got close to Mount Hermon. This is a beautiful picture of Mount Hermon. I didn't take this one, but I really like this one. One of our group took. But you can see in the distance, still a lot of snow on it. And up north is Caesarea Philippi. And at Caesarea Philippi, there's a grotto cave called... where they would worship the goddess Pan, the fertility god, the Canaanites did. And there was this cave there that we visited. And this was the area in Caesarea Philippi, there you can see it from a distance, where Jesus said to his disciples, he said, who do men say that I am? And who do you say I am? And Peter made the great confession, thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. And again, you see the waters and the streams running down from that area of the mountain, from Mount Hermon in that area. There's some more of the water. Not quite flowing quite as fast as the water he showed earlier. This is a little quieter. And we go there, back down, just not too far from Capernaum, is a town called Chorazin that Jesus would have visited with his disciples, and he would have taught in the synagogue there as well. And Chorazin had a lot of structures still standing. And you can go ahead to the next one, and we'll see some of those. This was the synagogue there at Chorazin. And the next picture shows the seat of Moses, where you would sit to read the law. They would sit whenever they read the law. The original of that was in the Israel Museum. That was just a reproduction. But anyway, here's parts of the synagogue there. And they showed some of the buildings there, the ritual baths there. The Jews were very much into ritual baths, and a lot of the remains of those are still standing. We saw hyrax, that's it right, or conies. In the Bible, you read about the conies, the animals, and we saw some of them in Chorazin. I have the next picture shows one of them. It looked a little bit like a groundhog, kind of plump. We saw them several of them running around in Chorazin. Interesting, something different. Okay, so Jesus would have traveled to many cities along the Sea of Galilee and taught. But he also went south, we know, to Jericho. We have many miracles he did in the Jericho region. Here he visited Jericho and saw Zacchaeus climbed up in the sycamore tree. And this could have been the sycamore tree. Probably not. But it definitely looks different than our sycamore trees, right? And this is the road on to Jerusalem. Now, when we read the story of the Good Samaritan, they talk about all the robberies and how bad it was. The road in between Jericho and Jerusalem, and the bandits that hid out. Here's why. This is what it looks like. It's a pretty desolate area. The only people live in that area, the Bedouin, and they still have sheep and goats on the hillsides grazing. There isn't a lot there to graze, as you can tell. But as we were riding along, I could notice ridges on the hillside. And I go, what? That is really weird. What's with all the ridges? And they said, through the years, the sheep and goats walking along the side of the hill have made all those little ridges on the hillside. It's like, oh, okay. There's another Bedouin camp on the way. Pretty desolate area. No wonder yeah. Finally, we made it to Jerusalem, and thank goodness we didn't have to ride on the camel the whole way. Mm-hmm. It would have been a hard road. That was kind of a neat experience, riding a camel. Did this on top of Mount of Olives. A guy had a camel there that several of us ladies got to ride while we were on top of the Mount of Olives. This is what Jerusalem would have looked like in Jesus' day. This is a model in the Israel Museum. There on the right, you see that larger area. That's where the Temple Mount was, and the temple was. There it is, there, and more toward the center of the picture with the fortress of Antonio to the left. And Jesus would have visited many sites around Jerusalem. This is the Pool of Bethesda. The Pool of Bethesda was probably fairly large, had different pools, and it had different columns and porches. At the bottom of it was probably where, if you think about Jerusalem, most of the things of Jesus' day is probably 20 feet below where you're standing today. So you'd have to go down to see them. So this other stuff had been built up later, and we did not go down to the bottom of it. But a really neat area that had been built around it. But quite a large area. Now I'm standing on the opposite side looking back over to toward one of the churches that was built in that area. That whole area was the Pool of Bethesda area where we were. And one area there, they had lots of flowers planted, and flowers were blooming everywhere, so I snapped a lot of pictures of flowers, and the poppies were blooming in the spring of the year there too. This is the Dung Gate as we're entering Jerusalem now. And we're going we're getting ready to go to the Western Wall. We had to go through security at the Western Wall. The Western Wall is what some people refer to as the Wailing Wall. It's not really a wall of the original temple. Some people say that. It was the retaining wall that Herod had built when he enlarged the Temple Mount. So the Jews go there to pray. A lot of people there. The men were on the left and the women were on the right. And a lot of people go there and we got a chance to pray too. While we were there, we saw this group of little Jewish boys come out for their first whatever they were doing. They were really cute. They were probably about first grade age, 5 or 6, all dressed alike. Russ got to go back into the men's area, which was larger than the ladies, and they had these, what do you call them, kind of cabinets or arks, okay, where they stored the Torah. And he got to see that area, and there was men in this area studying the Torah. I didn't see any of that because we're not allowed in the men's area there at the Western Wall. There he is in the middle there at the Western Wall. We got to go up and pray at the Western Wall. And there's the women's area. I thought it was neat. Now, notice I'm there in the middle, but to my right is a soldier. I saw some of the girls and the guys there at the Western Wall praying, and that kind of touched me that they were there praying for their nation, for their country. All the girls have to serve at least 2 years in the military, and the guys 3 years in the military if you live there. This is another picture of the Dung Wall on the other side, Dung Gate, on the other side as we're leaving. This is the steps where Jesus would have walked into the temple area. If you see that tan area on the left corner, this is the gate that was later filled in when the Muslims, which now occupy the Temple Mount, so they don't no longer enter. Of course, the Jews no longer enter from that area. But these were the original steps. And notice how irregular they are built. They are built irregular for a purpose. They built them irregular so you would have to think about where you're walking, and it wouldn't just be rope, you just go up to not even think, how we do sometimes steps that are all built the same way, the same height and depth. But their steps were built differently so that you would have to think about where you're going and a special place you're going to worship. This is some of the ruins of the ritual baths that the Jews would go through the ritual baths and cleanse themselves before going into the temple area there. And this was right beside the steps. Here's a close-up of the steps. Notice how old they are, but they are some of the very steps that they used. This is underneath the convent This is some of the original, would have been some of the original area in Jesus' day, some of the arches, and later we see some of the flooring that they would have used. Very old. Now, I got to go to the Western Wall at night, which was really an interesting experience. Russ had something else he was doing that evening and didn't get to go. So I, along with several others, got to go visit the Western Wall and go into the Western Wall tunnel. There was lots of people, lots of activity out there. So that was interesting. It was neat to see that a lot of people, it was crowded, a lot of people who had left work came out to the wall to pray in the evening. And so while we were there, we got to go down inside this tunnel, down to the bottom of the Western Wall, the area where Jesus would have walked, like I said, where it would have been more relevant in his day, because we're like on top of it, you know. This stone, this huge stone right here, when the Romans destroyed Jerusalem in 70 A.D., they pretty much leveled the city, except for stones like this. This huge stone that was behind our guide there is, if I remember it was 540, they estimated around 540 tons. But the Romans had chiseled out part of the top of it, but they never could level the stone. It was like 40-some feet long and 540 tons. There's a sideways view of this stone, but they never could topple this huge, huge stone. So, and now we walk down to the end where they had quit building the Western Wall. And the guide said, this is where they stopped. And the next picture shows the pavement where Jesus would have walked along the edge of the Western Wall in that day, the original pavement. And like I said, there was lots of tunnels and stuff to go through, some places really tight and small. Okay. And Jesus would have visited Jerusalem. He would have seen some of that area. Now we forward to the time of the triumphal entry into Jerusalem. At this point, we're standing on top of the Mount of Olives looking toward Jerusalem. And Jesus is lamenting over Jerusalem. And he is getting ready to go into Jerusalem down the street on the donkey. And this is as we are walking down the street of the Mount of Olives. And as we look in the side gate area of the Mount of Olives, we see all these tombs, people buried right there on the side of the Mount of Olives. And we continue to walk down the Mount of Olives, the road he would have taken in on the triumphal entry. And there's a view of Jerusalem. There you see the, what's it called?
Dome of the Rock.
Thank you, Dome of the Rock. I went, Dome of the Rock there, right there in the middle, where the Muslims now occupy where the Temple Mount is, where the temple would have stood in Jesus' day. And this is the Garden of Gethsemane, the olive trees, very, very old, where Jesus prayed. Another view of the Garden of Gethsemane on the other side of the church there. There's a church too that occupies that space. This is the oldest tree in the Garden of Gethsemane, thought to be 2,000 years old. That would have been in the garden at the time of Jesus when he visited. So, and then later Jesus went with his disciples to the upper room. I think I got those backwards, don't I? He went to the upper room. Oh, well. To have the Last Supper. This building was built over top of the site, so the architecture you see there is from a later period. But we stopped and read scriptures there and had prayer there as we were in the upper room area. And then we went on to where the house of Caiaphas was. And this church here in the middle of the picture is built over top of where Caiaphas' house was. Jesus was arrested first and taken to Caiaphas' house for trial. And as you go to the church, the doors, you'll see, are very ornate, very carved and ornate as you go into the church. And then when you enter into the church, there's this round thing here in the middle of the floor. In the next picture it shows. Right inside the church, there's a place where you can look down inside the dungeon area where Jesus and other prisoners would have been kept in Caiaphas' day to house the prisoners during the trial. These are the steps outside, the very ancient steps that probably would have been some of the steps that they used. And then we go on to Golgotha. If you've seen pictures of Golgotha before, it looked more like a skeleton than this picture. It has lost some of the nose and eye area, so it doesn't look as much like a skeleton today. But we can go back a minute and let me talk about that just a second. They were talking about crucifixions when we were there, and they said, well, Probably the Romans would have crucified at the bottom of the hill, not on top, because they would crucify near a main road so that people walking down the road would have saw firsthand what was going on. They would have done it on the mountaintop. But I thought that was interesting, that bit of information. I said, yeah, that's probably true. But anyway, this does look like the place of the skull still yet, not quite as much as before. All right. And then we would visit a tomb that was very, very close to that area. We don't know this was the tomb, but it's very close to the same area, and it looks like it could have been the very kind of tomb. And as our group approached, there was another group there. Beautiful garden area where we visited. Lots of flowers. I had to take pictures of the flowers and the verses, different places through the garden. We got to meet the gardener. He was out there working. Keep going to see some more of the verses and flowers. Everything was just in bloom. It was a gorgeous time of the year to be there. Very, very special place. A good place for worship. And there's our group outside the tomb. There's a door of the empty tomb there on the right. And we'll take you inside here in just a second. There we are, getting ready to go in, or we just left the tomb, I think. And they had a door there with this on the door where they could close it. And this is what the empty tomb looks like today. And there was a place where the stone would sit there at the bottom. And there's what where they would have laid the bodies. There's a stone slab inside, the back right corner. But just really a special place. As we walked through the garden, our group got to go to a special place for worship. They had areas with seats in different places of the garden. And we got to sit here and have a worship service. And Russ spoke at the worship service. And then another guy in our group named Steve had a poem that he wrote for this special occasion. And we got to have communion there as well. Very, very special, neat place. Enjoyed that. A few more flower pictures. And that's what it's all about, because he lives. And as we leave the garden there, we go back to up by the Sea of Galilee. Whoops, back to that one a minute. Back up to the Sea of Galilee, to where this is the edge of the Sea of Galilee where Jesus would have spoke to his disciples on that morning after the resurrection, where he would have had the fish and the loaves, and he was cooking the fish on the beach when they saw him on the shore, and they came to shore, and they said, "It's Jesus," and he would have asked Peter that important question, "Peter, do you love me?" And they've got a statue there in the Sea of Galilee too, from Matthew 24 that talks about that. And maybe that it was early that morning. Maybe it looked like this. This is morning pictures taken from the Sea of Galilee. Beautiful morning. Russ was not there with me that morning. I took these. Not very far from where we stayed there. This is the southern tip of the Sea of Galilee where I took the pictures, but maybe it looked like this that morning. Beautiful, beautiful pictures of. I enjoyed that. This is the Mount of Olives again, where Jesus would have said goodbye to his disciples and ascended into heaven. And then Russ is going to start here and tell you about the book of Acts.
Okay. This is a house in Jaffa, or in Bible days called Joppa, where Simon the Tanner. It says right over there. We didn't investigate this, but it was right there. It says, "This is the house Simon the Tanner." So took a picture of that, and that's where Peter was when Cornelius came, or sent his servants to come and say, "We want to hear about this gospel," and the first opportunity to preach to Gentiles. St. Peter's Church, beautiful architecture, just an incredible amount of beauty and investment in these different chapels. This is a modern city of Tel Aviv, which again would be on close to the same site of Joppa. Just refreshing breezes, you just feel it coming off the Mediterranean. If you're a person that likes the water, they got some great coastlines there in Israel. And again, a closer up there. And this was our last day before heading back, so we were able to be there. This is a baptistry in one of the churches that we had visited. I think there's another picture of another baptistry. Yes, was this in Capernaum, or one of those cities on the north side of the sea?
It's near that 7
baptismal pool where most likely children would have been baptized. This is in the town of Caesarea, or we call it Caesarea. Sometimes we pronounce it that way, but this is a amphitheater. Caesarea was Herod's attempt to build the best Roman city he could build, because he loved building stuff, and he was like the Romans were backing him up. So he builds this Caesarea port there on the shore, and this is an amphitheater. They still use it today because the sound effects, the acoustics are so great. And so this is a picture of what it looked like. I'm going to look this way. I should be looking this way anyway. A picture of what it looks like. And now the following pictures are all about this right now. So let's go ahead and forward that. So that's on the coastal scene there. That's the harbor. That's all built out. Originally it's just coastline, but he built that out so ships would come and go. And this is Caesarea, is where Paul went to Rome from here. After he was arrested in his ministry, he launched out from there, and just to see the ship just heading out west into that great sea, and people wondering, what's going to happen to Paul? Well, God's with him, and God's using him. Beautiful colors of the water there, and this was our first day off the plane, so we were really refreshing ourselves there on the coast there. This was a hippodrome, horse and chariot races. That was a big thing for that day for Herod and the Roman folks there. An aqueduct carried water about 7 miles from a spring to serve. And Caesarea had modern facilities. It was the most modern place you would want to live. It is even an elite place today in Israel, with $1 million homes around it, and the only 18-hole golf course in the whole country is in Caesarea. So, and I saw it out the bus window as we drove by. Couldn't get them to stop so I can get a scorecard, but whatever. But aqueducts there. All right, we're moving ahead into the time following the destruction of Jerusalem. This is Masada, the fortress Herod expanded, is one of his hidey holes, you could say, he would run to if he got paranoid. Well, in the last days of the Jewish revolt, the Zealots went there. That was their last holdout at Masada. And that's a cable car that takes 3 minutes to ride up from the parking area, about 1,000 feet up in elevation. You can walk the path. It takes 45 minutes to do that. We elected to do the car. So 3 minutes got us to the top. Another picture of that. And then when you get there, you walk that metal thing along the cliff to get in. So we're having a little adventure here going on with that. There's some scenes looking down from Masada, and that's the Dead Sea in the distance, barely able to pick that out. And so we're walking up into that's 40 acres on the top of this plateau. We would maybe call it a mesa kind of a thing. And we'll see more of the structures. This housed the most remote Roman spa in the world. Herod had a cushy life up there. He built this Roman spa and had water hauled up and everything, for that. They were in the process of restoring these walls. Everything above that black squiggly line is restored. Everything below is original to that. And that, of course, all the roofs are gone, but that shows you a little bit about some of the structure and buildings up there. And there's palaces and places to house animals and guest housing and everything up there. It's a major palace. There's the Dead Sea in the distance. You can see how that's just, and the Dead Sea used to be a lot larger, and so it would come up. You can see the salt and the remnants of that. Just again, some of the places I'll see from the top of Masada, just that desolate desert area. They made a movie on Masada. It was a made-for-TV movie. It came out several decades ago. I think a 2-night movie. They have some of the remnants of the movie making stuff. There's a battering ram that they used in the movie that's there on the far right. The next scene, I think, shows. No, this is. All right, we'll get to that in a minute. We're standing at the lowest of 3 levels. There's this level, a mid-level, and a high level of Herod's palace built into the corner, like sticking out from here. So we're down there on that lower part. We took a series of steps down there, about 200 plus steps to get down there. And that's a grackle. They eat right out of your hand. If you have a peanut or a cookie in there, they'll just hop right up and just eat it right out of your hand. So it's kind of cool. That's again the walkway. Again, just all the dried rock, and And they would have cisterns where they would collect water, because there's no wells digging out there, but they would collect their water. Again, the steps going up and down. This is a synagogue wall and a door going in. That would have a synagogue up there on Masada. Pictures again of some of the sites from the distance. Now that is the siege ramp that the Romans built to get to Masada. They had to build a pile of dirt and haul it by hand, and so they could march up and beat the door down and get into Masada that way. It took them a couple of years, to camp out there and lay siege to Masada. Of course, all the Jews at that point, they decided to kill themselves. At that point, they all died. This is a city called Bet-Shan, which is north up toward Galilee. We've moved beyond the Bible days now. This is a city that existed as a Roman and then later a Byzantine city up until about 730 A.D. when an earthquake destroyed it. But it's an example of a modern Roman city, and life went on after the Jews' country went away. Life went on for a lot of people there. This is an example of, I talked about a spa, Masada. This is the spa in Bet-Shan, a public spa. You can go out often. You can hang out there all day if you wanted to. It was a public service. Just hang out and sweat, dip in the pool, whatever. Live the cushy life if you wanted to. They made that public thing. And so you heat the floor, and then the water they had a way of moderating the temperature and all that. So very, very modern. A downtown Palisade area where you'd walk and do business and shop and all that. Next page. Always ask what you think that is. They had all the facilities that you would want. Here's your public potty. And you just find one that fit. Yeah. And join your neighbors. The next slide. And that's what we were all sitting there. Okay. Of course, it was closed. We were just trying it on for size.
And they had running water underneath when
They had their amphitheater, and that every Roman town had an amphitheater. Okay, we're jumping way ahead now. This is about 11 and 1200 A.D. And this is the fortress, Nimrod Fortress, which was built and exchanged hands between the Christians and the Muslims as they fought back and forth in Israel. And so it dominated that whole north part of the country. And we got a few pictures of that. Again, this goes back to about 12-something A.D. And we went inside and looked around, and of course they've excavated all this and places to shoot your arrows out and watch your enemies come or whatever. Great. This is northern. The Sea of Galilee would be to the left, further south. This is the valley north of the Sea of Galilee, the headwaters of the Jordan. And we went. This was an interesting spiral staircase down in the castle, and the next picture shows us going down. And then there's other pictures that get us through the inside of the castle. And this is the back door. If you needed to get out, this is where you'd go to get out of there, run away. Well, we really jumped a ways now. We're into the 20th century because this is the entrance to the Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem. And we spent a few hours in there, very moving. Helps us understand what they've gone through, not just under the Nazis, but really the anti-Semitism that had been ingrained in Western culture in Europe and even in the United States up until about that point. These two trees are in honor and memory of Oskar Schindler and his wife, who worked to save many Jews. And they have a whole avenue. The next picture, I think, might show, well, the next picture will, I think. Yeah, the whole avenue of trees planted in thanks of those who stood up, and provided and saved lives during that whole horrible period. And one of the inscriptions there.
As we left, we saw this inscription.
Yes, as we left. Let's see, what's next? Okay. And as we go forward, this is an Israeli military installation in northern Golan Heights. If you know anything about, that's a part of Israel that they took after the 6-Day War of 67, I believe. And they've had two major conflicts, 1967 and 1973. Short-lived. They were attacked and they just beat them back. This is the North Mount Hermon again. 3/4 of Mount Hermon is in Israel, 1/4 is in Syria. So we're really close to the Syrian border now. And we passed by this battlefield where in 1973, in the Yom Kippur attack, 1,500 Syrian tanks came through the valley and were fought off by 150 Israeli tanks. They call it the Valley of Tears because so many men and women sacrificed their lives to keep Israel safe. So they left some of the tanks on the battlefield there. And that's an Israeli tank. And they still have mines that they warn you about. You know, don't go over that fence. Nadine's going to take over here.
Okay. This picture shows, again, Mount Hermon from a distance, a snow-capped peak. We went on an overlook in the Golan Heights and could see all of the Sea of Galilee. In the next pictures, this is that one area shows. That is the northern part of the Sea of Galilee in that picture.
Can I get you the sense of the expanse? Yeah.
That's Tiberias.
Mm-hmm.
Again, looking, which way are we looking? Oh, we're looking down straight on that restaurant where we ate the fish. That's below
north.
us.
Lebanon in the far distance. If you just look over that hill, that's Lebanon in the far distance.
Again, looking toward Mount Hermon. There. And these are some sunset pictures. These are some of my favorite pictures because I like sunset pictures.
You can keep them rolling. There's a lot of them.
A lot of sunset pictures. This is sunrise, leaving one morning, I think. The rest of these are sunset. I take a lot of sunset pictures wherever I am. Enjoy the sunset. Just keep going. Beautiful area where we stayed on the southern tip of the Sea of Galilee. A lot of palm trees, flowers, just a really neat area. I could have stayed there the whole time, of course. It's in the country. Jerusalem's not in the country. Jerusalem was neat, too. But along there, still along the Sea of Galilee, our last night. There's a picture of the area where we stayed.
They call that a kibbutz, which used to be like a social commune where people just made a life together and raised animals, but now they're all resorts.
That's the cafeteria there where we ate. Here's Jerusalem. The olive tree was a very nice place to stay, but it was in the city. Here's all of us girls up in Golan Heights, Mount Hermon in the distance. Most of us girls. I don't think quite all of us, most of us. Our bus, we traveled on, 25 of us. This was
David, our
Dave Woods
guide.
in the middle, and then David, our guide, on the right, and our bus driver on the left.
Oh, what's his name? Remember his name?
What's his name, Rita? Rita's back there. Hi, Rita. What's his name? The bus driver. Yeah. He calls it Musa.
Musa.
Was it?
That's right.
Okay. Rita was in our group. This is our campfire last night at the Sea of Galilee. A lot of neat people. We met some of the Israeli soldiers. This is at Masada. We also met them other places too. They were friendly. Most of the time. No.
We got in trouble once, you know.
Not really. We all posed. These are the Jordanian soldiers on the other side of the Jordan River. They were right there. I mean, very close. This is some of the terrain there. You'd see a lot of people out still tending their sheep and goats. Then we moved on down to the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea area was interesting. It was neat. I'm glad we got to visit there. It was kind of a tourist area, very huge hotels in that area where people would go for vacations. Huge places. We stayed one night there. Sunrise on the Dead Sea.
I was up for that one.
We went out on that little spit of land. Now we're looking back at the shore toward the hotels on the shore. See how desolate area it is. This is how the sand and mostly salt area along the shore looked. I've got some samples of the salt in this little plastic container up here on the table if you want to see what the salt looks like and one of the rocks from the Dead Sea. This is looking south toward the lowest spot at the Dead Sea. Along the way, just along the countryside, we see camels out there sometime grazing. Again, area here at the Mediterranean Sea now, some favorite places. Again, the Mediterranean Sea there at Joppa. This is Tel Aviv. You're going to talk about some of the cities we saw.
We got caught in rush hour.
This is a lot of traffic, and Tel Aviv is pretty modern. Again, in Tel Aviv, we had a nice hotel there last night before we flew out.
Tel Aviv's considered by the world the capital of Israel. They don't recognize Jerusalem as the capital because it's contested between the Palestinians and the Jews. So Tel Aviv is the actual capital by the world's reckoning.
The next few pictures are farmland. I had to take some pictures of the farmland. I grew up on the farm. Most of you probably know that, but that's some of the hay fields. Didn't get a picture of the baler. We saw the baler once, and I didn't have my camera out in time. Just some different fields. We saw a lot of grape arbors, but didn't really get a picture of that. That is coconut trees?
Bananas.
Banana trees, wrong tree. Banana trees under that canvas there area with the Sea of Galilee in the background. We saw a lot of that in different places. Now, you can talk about that.
This is the building that houses the Knesset, which is Israel's Congress. And we saw that in Jerusalem.
When we were at
the Holocaust Museum. Yeah, I could see it from there. Or the
Israel
Israel
Museum. We saw that.
Narrow streets of Jerusalem as we walked our way into the old city. It's divided into 4 quarters, and just kind of a neat picture up that way. Some of the urban environment, a lot of young people living downtown Jerusalem. These apartments just on top of each other, and patios and verandas, and just all kinds of things. I found this playground walking around, and kids that they had built that up little park area, and kids were playing there with their parents and that. Those shops, we would come in and out of those. We had some time just to kind of wander around a little bit there that one day, and very friendly. Again, these plazas, just something. Just think of some of our younger people living in cities, enjoying the urban environment and that. And again, more shops and pictures of that. A lot of small cars, not a lot of big cars. Many big monster trucks like you see around here. Just little cars getting in and out of some of these small areas. Beautiful flowers and just again a beautiful time to be there. Don't recognize
that's one of the churches, I think.
Okay.
That we went in. We went in quite a few of the churches of the.
This is part of the vendors in the Jewish quarter that we had. There's some art businesses. We looked at a lot of things that were pretty cool there. We bought some things, bargained. This is our Armenian quarter, where we had lunch one day, and then we went booth to booth, and we're looking for good deals on this and that.
Yeah, you could bargain in a little bit and jump down a little bit.
Yeah, and there we bought our dinner for the next day.
It was real fresh.
That's goat or sheep, and if you want some livers,
very fresh.
That's a tray full of goat tongue in the front there.
What you don't see there is in the background there was a pile of goat heads. I guess okay, I didn't see that. Still.
Watch where you walk.
I said, watch where you're stepping, Russ. There was blood flowing out. Of course,
But this is more what we went. This is a buffet breakfasts and dinners and all, and different variety of things.
Back up to breakfast. I'll tell you what we had there. We had all kinds of vegetables and stuff for breakfast. Lentil salad there on the bottom, scrambled eggs, a fig, some kind of bread with tomato sauce, kind of like a pizza type bread with cheese on it, the mozzarella type cheese balls in the middle. Yeah. Sesame type dressing, and then there was peppers, and then some fish there on the far right corner.
Good hummus and pita bread. I still haven't found pita bread.
This is falafel. Falafel is a round. They look kind of like a hush puppy, but they're ground garbanzo beans made into balls, and they fry them, and then you eat them in pita bread with whatever kind of vegetables you want. Peppers, always had peppers, fresh vegetables, whatever you wanted, and sesame dressing with it.
We ate that on Mount Carmel, actually, our first day.
This is a buffet at Jerusalem. Always lots of good fruits and vegetables. Whatever meal you had vegetables. You could have vegetables 3 meals a day. And they were very fresh from nearby. This is some of the bread. The pita bread there looks kind of small. Fresh pita bread, though, was really good. Don't get pita bread like that in the States. The buffet, this is fish here on the near side. Some kind of tomato sauce over the fish. I ate fish just about every day, too. Was one of the main courses.
And you could go to McDonald's.
But we didn't.
We visited. McDonald's. Didn't you go to McDonald's? No. The last trip, okay.
Big Macs were $10.
$10 for a Big Mac.
It wasn't kosher anyway because they serve cheese on their Big Mac, and that's not allowed.
You can't do that. People would volunteer time to come over and just sift dirt. These are volunteers from around the world. We just come and help the archaeologists just sift bags of dirt and find what they could find in there. So a lot of that going on. Again, that's a close-up of them as they were working out there. And they would find coins and things like that. And one of our girls bought some coins from a vendor there, street
This is
vendor.
Ellen's hand, and she bought some of these coins that she's holding. I said, here, let me take a picture.
Signs very, can't miss this. Do not open. Danger of death. Whatever.
Notice the signs are always in 3 languages most of the time.
And
English, Arabic, and Hebrew.
Yeah, Hebrew's in the top, Arabic and English. Yeah, that's Coca-Cola's everywhere. So we saw these going to Nazareth. That's only 2. There's 2 more billboards next to them that I couldn't even get my camera.
Billboards.
Their version of Speedway. Gas so much a liter, as they would sell it there.
And we could find how to get home. There was a sign for center.
It was pointing right at you guys. Okay,
but it was in 3 languages.
Right back here.
Yeah. Anyway.
And
this is how we felt.
Dave was expressing it all for us. And
at the end of the trip.
That's the valley of Jezreel behind him and all that. So we had a wonderful 10 days traveling, 1 day to get there, 1 day to get back. 7 hours difference. If you go, if you haven't been, it's a wonderful opportunity.
Thank you for the opportunity of sharing this with you.